Welcome to Small Business, Big Results, a show where we share stories from small business owners and fast-growing startups. I'm your host, Brian Dean, and today I have Elaine Pofeldt with me. Elaine is an independent journalist and the two-time author of The $1 Million One-Person Business and another book, Tiny Business, Big Money. On today's show, we're going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes that new business owners make and how to avoid them. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, approximately 20% of new businesses fail within the first year of being in business. And after 5 years, close to half of businesses fail, and at 65% fail after 10 years. And some of the top reasons that small businesses fail include cash flow problems, lack of demand for the product or service, not researching the competition, not creating a business plan, or lacking the right team. And this is something we'll talk about a lot in a future episode of this show. And we have an exciting announcement for our audience for this episode. You have an opportunity to win a signed copy of Elaine's new book, Tiny Business, Big Money. And the rules are really simple. You just have to share the most useful thing that you learned from this episode on LinkedIn, and then tag Semrush, Brian Dean, and Elaine Pofeldt. And the first 5 that do this will get the book with an autograph with a personal message from Elaine. You can see the detailed rules right there. Good luck. So welcome, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's great to be here. And thank you to Semrush for hosting us.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Elaine. And you're one of the first people that I want on this show because you have such a unique perspective on how small businesses succeed or don't succeed. Most people, myself included, my business experience is from 2 businesses that I've started. Now, I started several failed businesses, basically 2 successful businesses. But if you think about it, that's really a small sample size of what makes a business succeed or fail or tick. You've had the unique experience of interviewing dozens and dozens of entrepreneurs from around the world. And I want to sort of, in this interview, extract some insights that you've gathered from the most successful of the group and some of the mistakes they've made along the way. So the first is an interesting one is before you have an idea for a new business or a new product, what are some things you've seen that work well in terms of validating these ideas before you actually go for them?
The most important thing that I've seen, Brian, is that you put the idea out there and see if anyone will buy it. So for instance, if you were going to have a course, you could send out emails to your list, even if the list is just the people in your email contact list, and see if they would be willing to spend money on it. And if so, how much? Asking people, not just your mother and your best friend, but other people that will be honest with you. You can do surveys. I know in the $1 Million One-Person Business, the couple that runs Brooklinen literally went to big box stores to see if people would buy the sheet sets that they were selling. They were pricing stylish sheets at a lower price point than most sheets cost. And that was how they gathered critical information. And one of the things they learned was that there weren't a lot of sheets designed in patterns that men liked, so they targeted that market. So that's another way to do it. The essence of a business is having something and selling it. So the closer you get to actually doing it, the more proof of concept you'll get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I just want to highlight a couple of things from there because there's a lot of good insights there. Like you said, you summed it up well, that ultimately an idea, you just don't know how it's going to do in the world. Like how many huge investors turned down Uber and Airbnb because they just didn't like the idea. But when it got out into the world, they ended up being huge successes. And I made this mistake early on with my first business that was a failure, was I waited as long as possible to put the idea out there. In fact, I was like keeping it a secret. I didn't want anyone to know about my amazing business idea. And as it turned out, that's so irrelevant. The faster you can get it out there and get validation, either feedback is good, but like you said, the ultimate is if someone's willing to fork over cash. And if you don't have a product ready, you can do a pre-sale or you can sell a beta version of the product or something. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be, you don't like the people that were selling the sheets. I'm sure they didn't have like 1,000 units in inventory. You don't need that to get started and get validated.
One of my favorite examples from Tiny Business, Big Money is Anna Gavia, who runs a business called Pink Colada, and what she sells are bikinis. And she was a medical school student when she started the business. She had only $200 to invest in the business, and she had grown up in Australia, in Melbourne, going to the beach a lot, and she wanted a bikini that was more athletic and would stay on in the water. And so she designed her own sketch, and she found a factory that was willing to make one prototype of the bikini. She took a picture of it, put it up on Instagram, spent $6 on Facebook ads to drive some traffic to it, and saw if anyone placed pre-orders. Then she wound up getting about 1,000 orders, and she went back to the
1,000 orders.
Yeah, which was an up-and-coming factory, and agreed to do a small run, because 1,000 is a lot if you're a new entrepreneur. But if you're a factory, you got to power up the factory, get the employees in there. That might not be enough for some factories, but she was able to build the business that way. And each time she had a new design, she would do the same thing. And if she was in love with the design, but customers weren't, she just didn't make it. So she avoided wasting any money.
Yeah.
And she used the power of social media to really get validation. When you use an approach like that, of course, you have to keep your ego out of the picture, right? There may have been some bikinis that were beautifully designed that the public just wasn't ready for yet. That's how I prefer to look at it. She was ahead of her time. You have to let those go if you're an entrepreneur, because otherwise you're going to have a non-profitable business.
Yeah. That actually leads me to my next question, which was, from the entrepreneurs you talk to, have you heard people say that ego has been a roadblock to them succeeding with their business? Is that something that comes up?
I think it's something people aren't always conscious of. When you have a business, it's almost like having a child, and so if someone told you they didn't like your child, it would really hurt your feelings. But I think most of the entrepreneurs that are getting to 7 figures find a way to develop a thicker skin and realize that all this feedback is subjective. What one person loves, another person hates. And you have to find your fans out there and go into running a business knowing that there will always be detractors, always people that don't get what you're offering, always people that are shopping in a different price point than you're selecting for your business. And you're going to have to let those go and double down on the people that love what you're doing and want more of it. That's how you grow a tiny business that makes big money to 7 figures.
Yeah, focusing on a niche, in other words, and then kind of ignoring the noise outside of those. There's your people, and then there's kind of not your target audience, and just kind of ignoring the other stuff.
Yeah, you don't always know exactly who that audience will be. By the way, sometimes you may think it's one group of customers, and then it turns out that the people buying your products or the businesses buying your products may be an entirely different group. And you have to be open to that too. But that's where the power of data comes in. You can actually analyze who is gravitating towards your brand, and then find out what messaging appeals to them, what type of design work appeals to them. There's so many things as a solopreneur or a person in a very small business you can do now, using tools like 99 Designs and other ones to really throw out the welcome mat to the people that are flocking anyway.
Yeah, that's great advice, by the way, because it's easy to kind of pretend that you know your target audience, and in some cases you will, but a lot of times, like you said, you'd be surprised who actually gravitates towards your product. And I was surprised when I ran Backlinko. My flagship course was called SEO That Works, and I created it for beginners because my thought process was, people that don't know, they're overwhelmed with SEO information, they're confused about what to do, so they buy my course to get clarity. And what I learned from actually putting it out there and doing several launches and selling it was that people that gravitated toward my course were agency owners and professional SEOs. It was a complete opposite group because they wanted a standardized process they could follow or give to their team to follow, or just level up their skills. Like they were, intermediate and they wanted to get advanced. So they just wanted to learn some new tactics they could try. And considering the price point of the courses were expensive, it made sense that beginners weren't really going to invest in it, but people that were intermediate or advanced or ran an agency, the ROI was there. You buy the course, you can use it on 20, 50, 100 clients. It's relatively inexpensive, but this is something that surprised me. I didn't know. So I had to change my whole messaging and a lot of the course itself to be more advanced and sort of not appeal to this beginners. And my whole messaging was completely off because it was just like, you're overwhelmed with SEO, you're confused, I have the solution, and it wasn't resonating. When I changed it to, you want to add new tools to your tool belt. These words and phrases came directly from talking to customers. You want a standard process that you can use on different clients in different industries. You want a system that you can give to new hires and have them follow. Stuff like that really resonated, but I would have never used that if I didn't put the product out there first.
And this is why you built a 7-figure business, because you listened. It's a hard thing sometimes to make that type of a pivot from a consumer market to a B2B. But I think what a lot of people find, you're kind of a hybrid entrepreneur in that you start out in a service business and then you productize the service. A B2B, if you're selling a service or even a productized service, sometimes a B2B market can be more sustainable because of the budget issue.
Yeah, that's the great insights there, Elaine, because the ego can really get in the way of these insights because it's so easy. I remember once I went to a startup incubator pitch fest many years ago when I was first starting Backlinko. And I remember this guy got on the stage and he talked about his startup, and it was really confusing. Like, I don't know if his startup was confusing or his pitch was confusing or both, but he got so many questions about kind of after 20 minutes, what is this exactly? How does it work? And he was really defensive about all these questions, as opposed to using that to improve his pitch or improve his product. At the very least, improve his pitch, because at the end of 20 minutes, that's a long time to pitch something. You should have people champing at the bit to buy whatever you're selling or want to know more. So in the beginning, yeah, it's great. Really, not even in the beginning. All throughout the process, you have to be like a little antenna and just be open to these things. It doesn't mean you should change course whichever way the wind blows when, someone gives you a piece of advice and you're like, oh, I guess we'll switch. But you're going to kind of know. That's one of the things about being an entrepreneur. You have to have this sort of insight and saying, look, we're getting so many people saying the same thing. That's usually a sign that you need to make a change. Yeah, that was really interesting. I'm glad I asked that question. I almost didn't. But you had a lot of really good insights on the ego and how it can help you or hurt you depending on how much you have. So switching gears a little bit, this kind of similar but different. A lot of people make the mistake when they're starting a business or launching a product of underestimating the competition, saying, I'm going to create a better widget or a different widget. What are some things you've seen that can sort of counteract that or help people see the truth about the competitive landscape that they're jumping into?
One of the things that's a useful construct for doing this is to think about your industry as being in a conversation, and each player is someone at the table participating in the conversation. What are they each saying, and are you moving the conversation forward? If you're repeating the same thing someone else is saying, then you're probably underestimating the competition, because no one needs someone doing the same thing as somebody else. Unless maybe they're in a different country or a completely different market where the customers wouldn't really know about the two of you. But everything is global these days. So for the most part, if someone's saying it somewhere in the world, then you need to move the conversation forward. It might be that your contribution is, I can do this, but at a little bit lower price. There's no reason that process has to be so complicated. But you need to be saying something different. And I don't mean just in the marketing message. I mean, your product is in conversation with all the other products out there, or your service is. So for instance, like in my business, I'm a ghostwriter, but I'm a ghostwriter who focuses on entrepreneurship. And I'm also an active working journalist. So I bring that perspective. That's different than there's probably some other people in that niche, but it's a very small niche.
Yeah.
And I have my unique experience. Each of us has that. So if you look at yourself, think about that too. You're, especially in a smaller business, you're part of the business. You are the business. So what do you bring forward that makes the business different? It could be you're an athletic dad or something like that, and you bring that vibe to the whole business, which has nothing to do with athleticism. It's just the personality, and people, when they contact the business, they feel great talking to you because you talk about sports with them. Something like that could be the differentiating factor. So it's really about making sure you're different enough. And if you're too similar, then you're probably underestimating.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I'm glad you said different a bunch of times, because one of the things I hear a lot from new entrepreneurs is, I've created a better version of X. The problem with that is that better is it's very subjective, and who is it better for is a really important question. And how is it better, and how much better is it? Because even if I found a better version of, the podcasting recording software we're using now, I probably wouldn't switch. because I'm like, it works. It's pretty good. I'm not like, someone came to me like, it's way better. It's cheaper. I'd still be reluctant. People underestimate how different something has to be to really stand out, to move that conversation forward, to make something that improves on what's out there. It doesn't need to be a whole new category or anything like, it doesn't need to be the blue ocean strategy necessarily, but you need to do something really different. And like Elaine, I think one thing I want to highlight that I thought was really a great insight was, it's not just your product. Like sometimes in most people's minds, most products in especially B2B are essentially the same. They're very similar. Like podcasting, recording software. I'm sure if you ask the people that created all these things, they would be furious at hearing this, that like, my thing is so much different than theirs. What are you talking about? But from a customer's point of view, they're all pretty similar. So what are you saying? What's your conversation, as you put it, that's helping you stand out, either the product or the marketing itself? Maybe one has an unfair advantage. Like you said, the CEO is amazing at creating TikTok videos. That in a certain context, in some situations, can be that competitive advantage, even if you have a Me Too product. That sort of, or maybe they're really good at paid ads, or maybe they're good at some other part of branding, whatever. The point is that sort of thing is an unfair advantage that you can have over the competition. So the key is more different, in my experience. Maybe you could tell me if you agree with this. Different is more important than better.
Think about Dollar Shave Club. Now that's gotten to be a pretty big company, but
yeah,
the CEO is in those crazy videos, right? And those are just routine razors as far as I can see. But the whole brand is around comedy, right? Which is interesting. One thing in terms of differentiating yourself, I think you raised a very good point, Brian, which is, don't count on yourself to make that judgment call, because you know what's in your own head. You really need a focus group, even if it's your neighbors or a bunch of business people that you know on Zoom. Ask them to tell you how they think it's different. And if they can't, there's either a gap in what you're offering or a gap in your messaging, and you can fix that.
Yeah, and the product's really, that's one of the reasons the product is never done. Is not just because you're always trying to improve it. It's also based on this sort of feedback you're getting that are saying, or if people are switching to another product. Like, let's say you have a podcasting software, and when people cancel, they're saying, I'm switching to a competitor. I'm switching to someone else. If you see that, it's easy to just say, well, good luck with that. Like, we're way better. But there's a reason that they're switching. When someone switches a service, for me, that's a huge issue. That's a big deal, because it's such a pain to switch. Even something simple like podcast, but some other things it's even harder, like email marketing software or things like that. It's a huge pain to switch. So if people are switching from there, it's telling you they're either not super happy with you, and or someone else out there is doing a better job at meeting people's needs. And usually that's a combination of marketing to grab their attention, and then the product itself to deliver on that, to make someone switch. So for me, that when someone, for my current venture, if someone, cancels, we have a survey that we ask everyone that cancels. We ask them to say why. And we had, a lot of data. And then we have some people that said they switched, and I always email them personally and just ask, like, really in a non-pressure way, like, what made you switch? Like, I totally understand you want to switch, and I respect that, no problem, but like, what made you switch? Just a simple open-ended question. And usually they're not going to say marketing, like their marketing was better, but a lot of times they'll give you insights into what you're not doing that someone else is doing better. And unless you ask, people aren't usually going to proactively tell you.
That's such a great tip, to just ask directly, even when you feel like you've had a knife put into your heart. Be calm, cool, and collected, and just send a non-judgmental message and try to find out what's going on. One area where I think there's a good example of this, we all use different accounting software. And I started out with one that was very easy. And then at the time I added employees in my business, it didn't accommodate that. So I had to switch to another one that wound up being much more complicated to use. I needed to learn double entry accounting. It's not my forte. I'm a writer. I was never that good in math. So I started getting frustrated. And then I was doing a podcast interview, and the host was similar to me, and we were kind of complaining about our software. And he said, you've got to switch to Bench. And Bench, artificial intelligence, like you just basically hook them up to your different accounts, and a lot of things are pulled in. You still have access to a bookkeeper, but you don't have to do any of the things you have to do with most accounting softwares. And I thought, wow, they listened. right? They knew that there were people like me. There are lots of people that go and take the courses in double entry accounting, and they're great at that. But there's a certain customer who will never do that because they're busy doing something else. They found this huge niche of all the people that are too lazy to learn double entry accounting.
Which is most people, honestly.
Customer, and they're not paying me or anything to say this. I really found that they filled a gap in my life that I no longer have to worry about. So if you think about that, like the things where you wish you could bring people along, you think it would be so easy for them to do what you're saying, but yet they don't do it. For some reason, they're not complying with your best practices for using your product or service. That's probably a signal that you either need to augment your services or they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's really good. Bench is I actually just came across them last week. And for the first time, I'm looking for an accountant, and someone recommended them. And I haven't tried the product, so I can't speak to it. But what struck me was their messaging was really good. It had a line that was the headline on the homepage, or something along the lines of like, "We take care of your accounting so you can focus on your business." That's a line that they probably heard. Like when they asked people, what's kind of frustrating about accounting software? I'm sure people told them, I don't even want to deal with it. Like, I don't want features. I just want it fixed. And like you mentioned, Elaine, the features, like a lot of times it's tempting to like add this and add that, but a lot of times it's just making it so that you don't even need the feature. You know what I mean? Like when I just started a trial of a piece of software today, and when I logged in, it was like you needed a PhD to get started. They had the onboarding videos and blah, 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 but it's like, why can't it just be like a workflow that takes me from like starting a project, step 2, step 3? You just jump into this software and you're super overwhelmed. And I'm like fairly tech savvy. I have a software company myself. So you can imagine someone that's like not as tech savvy logging in. They must be like, I have no idea what to do. So to sort of wrap up, this was an interesting question. You had really good insights there. First of all, if people are sort of like stuck with your product or like having issues, a lot of times more features is not the answer, or people are churning, whatever. In my experience, now that I'm running a SaaS company, more features can sometimes be the answer, but most of the time it's just making it so they happen sort of automatically. That's what people just want problems solved. They don't really want features at the end of the day. So I thought that was the really good insight there about how you can stand out. And then when you're marketing too, you can just if you talk to customers, you have insights into the words they use and kind of what they want at the end of the day. And I'm sure that's how sort of Bench and these other things came about, was that people like you and me, Elaine, who can't stand accounting stuff. I don't want a feature. I just want it done. They must have heard that enough times to be like, there's a market for this, and just create a product that just does it for you. And they said, we could just compete on features, or we can compete on price, or we can compete on, the niche. We could be the QuickBooks for dentists or something. But they said, you know what? Most people just don't even want to do it, so we'll just do it automatically. So yeah, I'm glad you brought them, because that marketing, their homepage really spoke to me when I read that line. I was like, it's a sneaky, insightful line on their homepage that I'm sure was like dozens of hours of talking to customers and understanding what they want to hear, which is you want to hear it's taken care of.
Yeah, hand this off. You can, if you have a gap like this, you don't necessarily have to solve it yourself. Another way to address it is to partner with a friendly business. And partnerships are sort of this underrated strategy, because there's no like real playbook for it. It's hard to sort of scale. And basically, like you said, you want to find someone who's sort of good at the opposite thing that you're like. There's tons of people like that are just, they're really good at social media, and that's it. They would have no idea how to create a product or service or fulfill it or do customer support or do operations or anything like that. But if you're good at all that stuff except social media, then it's a perfect match, right? Because that person you can sort of team up on things. Or it's all about finding these like kind of mismatches where you have something they don't have and they have something you don't have. And usually you can work it out. Like I remember when we first did a newsletter swap with Morning Brew, which is huge newsletter. So why would they want to partner with us? Well, to make it fair, we promoted them 3 times and they promoted us once, because our list was
this was one of their not their main list. It was like their tech list. It was still 3 times bigger than ours already. So the point was like, you can always kind of work out something that works best for everybody. You know what I mean? And I think it probably, to be fair, it was probably only twice as big, but just for like moving things along, we agreed to do 3 times. Like that's kind of how you want to do it. So then everyone leaves thinking they got a good deal from the partnership.
That's a good tip for people that are starting out, because a lot of times it can't be even because you're a startup and the other business isn't, but you may have something they want, even if you have a micro following. And there's a lot of brands that are trying to reach micro influencers and their following. So think about what you can give them that will help them. And chances are there is something, if they're even talking to you, there's something you have that can benefit them.
It's like you said, Elaine, it's all about the relationship. Like just do the work and provide something of value, and what you get in return is what you get. Obviously, you're not going to like keep going back to that well and, you know, having this uneven thing that's tilted in the other person's favor. But it's not when a partnership, it's not about trying to get 50-50 or anything like that. I don't even look at it like that. It's just, how can I provide as much value as possible and leave some on the table every single time? And usually over the long run, it kind of works itself out. So yeah, last question before we get into the rapid fire questions, which is, I really want to hear your thoughts on this from just talking to so many entrepreneurs from so many different industries and niches and sizes and everything. I want to talk a little about channels. Have you, from the entrepreneurs you've talked to, did they say that's like a huge thing where picking the right channel was it a huge deal, or was it more about the product or the service? Or is it kind of a mix of both? Some people say the channel is really important, whether it's SEO or Instagram or whatever. What is sort of your insights on that?
I've never asked directly, but what I will tell you is I noticed that for a lot of them, email marketing and social media marketing are very important. There are certain entrepreneurs where word of mouth is really critical, but I'll give you an example. James Taylor, who I did an event with at the New York Public Library last week, he's a keynote speaker, and he uses a CRM called Entreport, which costs a little bit more, but it's kind of souped up so he can do a lot of tricks with it. And he was telling me about the way he structures his campaigns. There will be a series of 5 emails that go out. And the last one, he's from Scotland, it ends with something about Scottish country dancing that isn't even really about speaking, but it's kind of a conversation starter. And he said, you'd be surprised. Sometimes that's what gets me the keynote. And they really learn to use whatever tool it is and master it and look at the feedback. I think the channels are definitely very important. For some of them, it's social media, and it's a specific social media like Instagram. Jenna Kutcher, who's in the book, she's a photographer who started selling photography classes online, and she's got a podcast called The Gold, G-O-L-D, Digger podcast. And then she created kind of like a lifestyle site on Instagram, you know, where she has pictures of herself and her husband and their cute little children and things like that. And she gets advertising revenue from that. And she's really gone in big with Instagram. Tiffany Williams, who runs a business called CEO Inside Her, which teaches women how to start businesses, is really big on Facebook and building communities on Facebook. I think mastering one of them and really understanding how it works is better than trying to spread yourself over all the different ones. From what I've seen, these folks, they have a presence on the other ones. Yeah. But they spend most of their time on one and just really excel at that one. And that's what seems to build the business.
Yeah, that's a good, I agree with you, by the way. There's other people that have, like, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And when it comes to business, there's no one way to succeed. So, you know, some people are like, you need to be everywhere. So then when someone's on YouTube, they see you, and TikTok and whatever. And like you said, you should have a presence on these platforms probably, but do you really need to be like super active? It does help to specialize. It's like Bruce Lee said, you know, you don't fear the man who practiced 10,000 kicks. You fear the man who practiced one kick 10,000 times. And the thing is, if you just focus on one channel and you're like the master at that, and you just are like the ultimate Instagram influencer, you know exactly how it works, hashtags, pictures, Instagram stories, you're going to beat up on everyone like me who barely knows how to use it. But if they enter the SEO realm, you know, I would beat them up. So that's the whole point. You want to have your little realm that you know really well, and you can sort of dominate. And then you can always spread over time. You can be on one channel. But the thing about channels, especially social media, is that it can be easy to sort of like jump on the next thing and dilute yourself, and you're not doing well at one. And that's why I really, when it comes to social media marketing, I really always focus on Twitter. And now I focus a little bit more on LinkedIn. LinkedIn tends to be working a lot better than Twitter lately for me. So anyway, I just want to hear insight, because there's sort of this thing about the channel is really important, because it's this, if you get a channel early, it can be a huge advantage. Like if you got on TikTok like 2 years ago, you'd have no one there, you'd be able to dominate. But at the same time, if you're sending people to an inferior product, or your marketing is off, it's usually not really going to make a difference. So yeah, it's kind of a balance, I suppose, between the channel and then actually delivering at the end of the day. That's what matters. Like you said, delighted customers is really what business is all about.
With one caveat, which is that you need to be able to get in touch with the people some other way, because you could get kicked off a platform for unknown reasons in the future. And so you don't want your whole business to reside in the hands of Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or any of the platforms, or Amazon. You need to build your list in more than one place, just in case.
Yeah, that's good. Or have an email list. Take those people from those platforms on an email list, because you own that list. You can take it with you. If YouTube shuts on your channel, you realize those are YouTube subscribers, not your subscribers. They're gone. Like there's nothing you can do about it. So that's really good insight, that if you're over leveraged on one, there's a risk that if you got shut down, you could go to zero, which is where no one wants to be. So you're right. If you want to do well on these platforms, but the goal is to sort of diversify your traffic as much as possible. And the best way to do that, I mean, yes, you can diversify among social channels, and that's fine. But the best way is to get people on an email list, because that's something you own and control and can take with you and whatnot. So that leads us to our rapid fire questions. So besides your own fantastic books that I've read both, what is your favorite book?
I liked The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon.
Is there a CEO that you're following or studying or sort of looking up to right now?
Well, Brian Dean, who sold his one-man business to Semrush. I often talk about your story because it's so symbolic of what you can accomplish in a very small business today. And I think it's the tip of the iceberg of a bigger trend.
Yeah, well, thanks, Elaine. I appreciate that. Wow, it's so nice. I wasn't expecting that. Are there any topics that you're sort of like nerding out on right now, or curious about, or researching?
One area that I'm very interested in is people kind of breaking away from big institutions. I feel like the pandemic shook up our faith in things like schools and government, and yet we need some structure. And so where that's going to go in the future and how technology fits into the mix is really interesting to me right now.
Yeah, I'm also interested in that as well, because there's studies about trust in institutions. It's been going down steadily over the years, and they don't even have the pandemic numbers in. Yeah, that's a cool one. That's really interesting. What is your favorite online tool that you just can't live without?
I still like the scheduling tools. Like I use Schedule once. It saves me a lot of time, and I always come back to that one. It just seems to be the biggest time saver in my type of business.
Yeah, cool. And then what's the best compliment you've ever received?
Well, now I have 4 children, ages 12 to 18, and the best compliment is when they want to do something with me.
That's great.
They always do when they're teenagers. They want to do stuff with their friends. So that always, like if they want to go canoeing with me or something like that, I'm really happy.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's a good one. How many hours of sleep do you get every night on average?
My phone tells me this. I get 5 or 6 because I go to a hot yoga class every morning during the week. It's at 5:45 a.m. It's the only time I can really make it, because once my day starts, I work, I have kids, blah, blah, blah. And I work outside of the U.S. time zone a lot. So I try to catch up on the weekends. And I've thought, well, I could sleep in, and maybe there's an argument for that, but there's nothing like hot yoga for me. I think you and I have yoga in common. I think I remember you like yoga also. Maybe I'm imagining. Yeah,
I don't do hot yoga, but I do hot yoga. But yeah, it's great especially first thing in the morning. It just clears the mind and all that good stuff. But 5:45, you're amazing that you can do that. That's insane. That's so cool. Do you have a go-to lazy dinner, whether it's takeout in New Jersey somewhere or just in general, that you like to cook up at home?
It's sushi, takeout sushi.
Okay, nice. It's a good one. We haven't heard that one yet. What's something you wish you knew when you were 20?
That everybody doesn't have to like you. Have a happy life.
That's a good one.
Especially now on social media. I mean, if I was 20 now, I'd be growing up in the era of social media, but I grew up before that. And I think it's really hard on people who are young, to live in that fishbowl.
Yeah.
But in the end, it doesn't really matter. As long as you have some people that like you, you can still have a happy life. And even if that some person is just you liking yourself, that's a good place to be.
Yep. That's a good one. At what time of day do you get your best work done?
Usually in the morning. I try to save my most important work for like 8 in the morning, as soon as I drop my son off at school.
Cool. And then what occupation other than your own would you like to try?
I'm a health nut, Brian, and I've thought that maybe something in holistic health might be up my alley. I still think about it where I might go with that, because I do think there's a lot of overlap between that and the type of work I do, writing about one-person businesses. I think they're healthier for people emotionally, physically, spiritually than a lot of corporate careers. But there are some health things that people can do specifically, I think, to deepen that even more.
Interesting. Yeah, so that wraps up this interview. Thanks so much for coming on, Elaine. You dropped so many knowledge bombs, so many unique insights that you don't really hear anywhere else. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. This was such a pleasure after interviewing you so many times, just to have a chance to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, Elaine. Thank you.